My name is Lisa, and I remember growing up, my grandmother used to always tell me stories about the Banshee, which was a well-known Irish legend. The Banshee is known to keen outside a window if there is going to be a death in the family, whether it's near or far. I was arguing one night with my mother as she wouldn't allow me out to a party. I was furious as my older sister was allowed to go to the party. My mom's reason for not allowing me was because I failed an exam. How lame. I ran to my room and slammed the door and started sulking. My room was ground level as there was no stairs in our house. I was lying on my bed checking through social media on my phone, sure that I'd be driven mad with my friends' updates of how amazing the party is. Suddenly, I heard something strange coming from my window. I heard a tapping sound, and I got a start when I heard what seemed like a woman keening, which I remember my grandmother telling me that is exactly what banshees do. I walked up slowly and cautiously to my window and jumped with fright as an old withered-looking woman stared right at me, shouting, "Help me, sweet girl, I am very cold and I was in a car accident." I didn't believe the woman, but I did have a tiny doubt she might be telling the truth. Was I being paranoid over all my grandmother's stories? Then suddenly, I jumped back as the woman banged at the glass and shouted hysterically, "Let me in, you bitch! Let me in!" I couldn't bear looking at her eyes any longer as I ran into the kitchen and shouted to my mom, "Call the police!" I saw my mom on her phone crying. I asked did she see the woman, but my mom didn't answer. She just kept crying. A few minutes later, my mom explained to me that it was the police were on the phone, breaking the news to her that my sister had been killed in a car crash on her way to the party. Some nights, I think I hear tapping on my window, and sometimes I even wake up in a sweat thinking I can hear the Banshee keening. Simon always, as long back as he can remember, always wanted to go to the St. Patrick's Day parade, but his drunk father never allowed him. His father used to stay at home all day drinking and getting drunk. Years later, when Simon was 8 and had the independence to go himself, he made the most of it and wanted to really make an impact on St. Patrick's Day and enjoyed it to the full. He designed shamrock hats at the tender age of 8, and for some reason they became a must-buy hat, and the shops couldn't have enough for the people that wanted to buy them. They were that popular. It was finally St. Patrick's Day, and he was really looking forward to finally enjoy St. Patrick's Day parade. He walked into the parade and enjoyed all the floats and was so happy seeing people wear his beloved shamrock hat. He knew that now was the time. After all, he was so lucky to be able to come across a witch one day on his travels through a fairy fort. He still didn't believe it until it happened. Then he said the words, "St. Patrick's Day, top of the morning to ya." They could be any words he chose, the witch said. It was all what was done during the ritual made it work. He looked around, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, but finally he could see some man next to him turn green, then his child. He smiled knowing this was all happening. Within minutes, there were more and more people turn green and turn into leprechauns. And within 20 minutes, the whole parade was a bloodbath, with leprechauns killing each other by any means necessary. Simon smiled, knowing that finally he got payback for all those years his school friends and families were enjoying St. Patrick's Day. Joshua was an elderly farmer who was living in rural Ireland. He was feeling very isolated on the farm since his only daughter moved to America, where she was working in a rest home in Texas. One day he had an idea while walking around his farm. He had noticed really nice wood to use to carve walking sticks to make and send to his daughter as a surprise. The only problem was that where the wood was, it was a fairy fort. Legend had it that folk tales associated with fairy forts typically relate a curse or retribution enacted upon those who would disturb or destroy the structures. As he carved the wood into the sticks, he prayed that nothing would happen him doing so. After he had about 20 sticks made, he sent them over to his daughter as a gift. His daughter Sharon was working in a rest home, but lost her job 6 months ago, but didn't want to tell her dad. She had a problem with drugs that was spiraling more and more out of control. She was popping the strongest painkillers and also using crystal meth. She didn't want to tell her dad how much of a mess her life was in. She sat down in her trailer, worrying about paying back a loan shark $10,000 that she got off him for a loan. She got the loan to pay off a local drug dealer that she knew didn't mess around. If she hadn't gotten the money, she would have been killed, and if she can't pay back the loan shark, she knew she would be killed also. But she thanked God she was able to get a loan of $10,000 to get the drug dealer off her back at least. One day her dad's walking sticks arrived, and she felt a pang of guilt and pain that he went through all that trouble of carving walking sticks for the residents of the rest home he thought she still was working in. She had put the $10,000 in the bank for safekeeping until the drug dealer called for it in a few days, as it was way too dangerous around her neck of the woods to keep that much cash in her trailer. She wrote out a check and sent it to her dad. Her dad was delighted to cash the check for $10,000. He rang her to thank her, and she froze and then said, "Dad, I am so sorry, that check was meant to have been for $10, not $10,000. Then the man that was looking at Joshua counting the money behind him ran up and hit him in the head and grabbed his wallet. He saw him put all the money in. That night the drug dealer arrived, and Susan told him the story. The drug dealer started laughing and said, "Do you think I'm stupid? You just ran out of chances, bitch." Then he shot Susan dead. Joshua found out about her death a few days later and regretted ever stepping foot inside the fairy fort, knowing it was the fairy fort that made everything go wrong. It was a beautiful summer's day, and me and my friend decided to visit a local castle called Ballet Castle. We walked for miles to see it, and it was all worth it when we saw what such a beautiful castle it was. Me and my friend were walking around the countryside when we discovered a beautiful white horse painted up on the side of a cliff. We didn't climb up to see it up close, as it was pretty steep and we didn't have the energy to go climbing up anyway. We got a start when someone suddenly came out of the bushes. It was a man holding a bucket of white paint. I told him it was a beautiful idea. Oh yes, it looks beautiful maybe, but there's a sad story behind it. I asked him, what was it? And he began to tell us the story about the white horse. Years and years ago, there was a beautiful farmer's daughter who fell deeply in love with a local farmer's son. They used to love being in each other's company and wander through the hills holding each other's hand. The girl used to ride a white horse that used to shine bright against the sun on a lovely summer's day. The boy and girl knew that what they had together was true love, so she told her father they wanted to get married. Her father lost his temper instantly and shouted in a rage. No way was she going to marry that boy, and she would marry a man of his choice. There was a huge argument between herself and her father over it, so she ran out crying and jumped on her horse and went riding through the woods. The girl was screaming for her life as the white horse bolted over the edge of the cliff, with both daughter and horse falling to their deaths. The white horse was painted on the cliff to mark this fateful day. I told the man what a sad story. Suddenly, me and my friend heard a horse behind us galloping, and when we looked back to the man, he was gone.
Of all the money that e'er I spent it in good company, and of all the harm that e'er I've done, alas, it was to none but me, and all I've done for want of wit to memory I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all.
Ireland is full of ghost stories, and one of the most famous of them all is the story of a ghost who returned to the living world with the sole intention of righting a wrong. What makes this ghost story so famous and memorable is because James Haddock was acknowledged and celebrated by the Bishop of the time, Dr. Jeremy Taylor. This gave the story a very strong foundation to be passed down through the years as an Irish ghost story. James Haddock was a farmer who lived outside of Belfast. James died in the year 1657, but after his death, his spirit had returned to the land of the living to avenge those who did him wrong. James Haddock had made a will that those who should inherit his manor house and farm were his wife Arminel, his young son John Haddock was to receive the rest of it, once he reached the age of 21. Mr. Davis was the name of the executor of James's will. Davis married James's wife Arminal a few years after James's death. It was then was the start of the reason for James's spirit to start his haunting, as after James's death, Mr. Davis changed James's will where he put his own son as the beneficiary instead of John Haddock, who was the rightful heir. Davis would have got his own way only for the haunting of James Haddock. It started one night during September. James's friend Francis Taverner was on his way home to Hilborough. Nothing was out of the ordinary until suddenly his horse stopped on the Drumbridge near Brumbeg. Taverner wondered what was wrong, but didn't think much of it, so just got off his horse and led him across the bridge. Suddenly he got a start when he saw a figure in a white coat appear right in front of him. Francis couldn't believe his eyes, because the white figure in front of him looked exactly like his friend James Haddock, who had passed away 5 years before. Francis was shocked to the core when the ghostly figure begged him to make sure his son was the rightful owner of the land that was due to him. Francis refused and jumped on his horse and raced away like a racehorse. Francis heard a very strong wind and screeches almost like a banshee when all of this was happening. Francis was happy to arrive home, and as soon as he did, he fell down on his knees and prayed to God to protect him from whatever he just saw. The next night, Francis still wasn't over the shock of seeing his friend's ghost when he suddenly saw him again. As he was sitting by the fire with his wife, he was disappointed his wife could not see the ghost, and wondered why. James Haddock begged and pleaded with Francis that he has to go to his wife to persuade her to make sure his son gets what is due to him and what is rightfully his. He begged for him to make sure justice was done and to right the wrong. Francis once again refused to offer any help, and due to it, he was visited by James Haddock's ghost every single night for a month. Francis was in a very bad place and knew he had to get away from it all, so he fled to Belfast. But to his horror, the ghost had followed him. He didn't know what to do. The ghost was getting more and more aggressive, and was now demanding Francis go back to Arminal and punish her in the worst way for her terrible treatment of their son John. Francis was shocked and scared more than ever, as the ghost warned him that if he didn't do what he was told, there would be extreme measures taken. Francis Taverner knew he had to confide in someone, and couldn't think of anyone else to go to for help besides his local chaplain. Francis explained the whole story from the very first time he saw the ghost on the bridge to the night before. When the chaplain was told not long after he had the whole story, he then went to visit Dr. Lewis Downes, who was the vicar of Belfast at the time. The three men went to see Davis to explain the ghost's message and demand. Davis laughed at the men as if he was just told a very funny joke. He refused to make any change to the will and refused to give up any land. After none of what was done so far worked, the ghost of James Haddock had told Francis Taverner to take the matter to court. Francis knew that this would be farcical, because 1, they would laugh at the idea of a ghost, and 2, there was no witness. The ghost must have known Francis's worry, as he said, Don't worry about them not believing you, for I will appear myself in the court. When you are the judge or whoever calls upon me, I shall appear. The court was held in Carrickfergus, and it was under the title, The Court Case, to return the estate to John Haddock. The opposing counsel mocked and jeered the idea and began to call for James's ghost to appear. He started shouting in a mocking tone, "James Haddock! James Haddock! James Haddock!" On the third mention of James's name, he received a ghostly, creepy, out-of-this-world response. Reports circulated that then, in that very moment, there was a huge clap of thunder, and the courtroom shook as if there was an earthquake. And to make matters worse, a hand appeared in the witness box, and a voice from beyond this world asked, "Is this enough?" After that, the court case was settled almost immediately. Davis left the courthouse, where crowds of onlookers shouted abuse at him. He just wanted to go home, but he never did get home. The reason Davis never reached home is because as he was riding home, he was thrown violently from his horse and broke his neck. It was after this day Francis Taverner never saw the ghost of James Haddock again. The tale of the ghost and everything that came with it was the talk of the town and reached all corners of Ireland. It was then that Bishop Jeremy Taylor put it in writing that the ghost was true. The bishop said that James Haddock's ghost was the only ghost who ever answered a summons in the court of law. James Haddock was buried in Drunbeg Parish church courtyard in the 17th century. It is said throughout history that his tombstone will never ever stand up straight. Even when it is moved upright, it just falls over. To this day, it lies in moss and dirt. Is the reason the tombstone doesn't stand upright a message from James? Is he trying to tell us something?
Of all the money that e'er I spent it in good company, and of all the harm that e'er I've done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit to memory I can't recall. So fill to me the parting